to drive your career, not just ride along? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm Simone E. Morris, your host and career strategist, here to give you the roadmap. Each week, we're cutting through the noise with strategies, stories, and insights to get you back in control. Your career clarity starts right here. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm super excited because we're doing today's episode in person, and I get to meet the fabulous Kira Deneen, who is a genetics counselor, and I like to think of her as a podcast guru because she's been doing this for a while, but is also the host of DNA Today. Kira, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. And what a treat we get to record in person. That doesn't happen too much. That's a rare aspect in podcasting. I think we'll have a much better conversation because we're in person.
Oh, I'm excited. So because you've been doing the podcast thing for a while, I think dating back to 2012 or so, tell me, how often do you do it in person? Have you been doing it in person a lot and then COVID happened and you're not, or what's the story?
Oh, probably 95% of episodes I've done are remote. Yeah.
Okay.
So not many in person, but when I go to conferences, I'm able to record in person of, hey, I saw you do this presentation. Can we chat for 10 minutes and flip on the mics and record? But we are doing much more in person now because we have a bunch of new equipment that we're really excited to use this year. And so now we're flying to do certain interviews. So yeah, very excited to just be doing a lot more in person. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Awesome. Well, back to the the Power of Owning Your Career show. I'll stop geeking out. All right. So tell us, how did you get to the place of being a genetics counselor? Is that something you always wanted to do when you were growing up?
Since I was pretty young, yeah. So in high school, had learned about the career through my mom. And she was like, oh, I found your career. And I'm like, okay, what is it this time, Mom? Like, what did you discover for me? And she was like, oh, it's called genetic counseling. And I was like, okay, well, what is that? So my mom is a social worker.
Okay.
So I come from that kind of background of just growing up with that counseling mindset. And she has loved her career and found it very rewarding. And so I was like, well, I want a career like that. I want to feel like this is really something that I'm contributing to people's lives. So I learned about it and I was like, okay, let me check this out. And it's to become a genetic counselor, you need to go through a master's program. So I was like, okay, well, I really like this Sarah Lawrence College, which is pretty local to us. It's in Westchester, New York. And I was like, okay, well, Mom was like, well, you got to go to undergrad first. You can't just go right to grad school. So got my undergrad degree and then kind of continued on. And I did end up going to Sarah Lawrence, which was pretty great. That was kind of the dream. And then it happened. So
Awesome. Awesome. So this show is about being in control, taking control and ownership of your career. And I like to call that the driver's seat. When did you realize that you were in the driver's seat for your career?
That's an interesting question. I think for me, it's interesting. I was listening to a previous episode of yours with Amanda Butlett, and she focuses so much on networking. And so much of me listening, I was like talking to no one because I'm listening to this just by myself. And I was like, yes, like exactly, like networking is so important. And I think when I started the show, I was, for this show, DNA Today, I started it as a senior in high school. And the year before, I had been doing a different podcast. So I kind of figured out how to do podcasting and the basics. And then I was like, all right, let me start this new show so I can meet people in the genetics field and I could learn about more careers. Do I really want to do genetic counseling? Is there anything else? And so as I was doing that, I was like, oh, wow, this is pretty great. I can be in the driver's seat, as you're saying, or like behind the mic in my life and have all these meetings with people and really learn about different aspects of genetics, but make these really valuable connections. And they would connect me to the next person, the next person. So I think once I started realizing the power of networking, I was like, oh, I am very much in control. And I don't come from a family that comes from a science background. So it's not like I had a bunch of family connections to help me in that space. I think if I went into business, it would have been a little easier in that sense. But yeah, I think once I realized how important networking was, I was like, wow, yeah, I'm kind of in the driver's seat.
I love that. So, how do you? I am a career coach, and a lot of times my clients will talk about the jitters around networking. So, since we went to networking, how do you cultivate relationships? How does that work for you? Because it's not a just hit them and episode and see you later, alligator. How do you, build up the confidence to ask for the interview, and then how do you cultivate what's the staying power to build a relationship?
I think a motto a lot of people use is fake it till you make it. It's
Mm,
definitely one I live by. That it's like, okay, well, at what point am I considered a podcaster, right? Is it just when you
mhm,
release that first episode? Is it like,
mm,
oh, you've hit a certain landmark of episodes, you've won an award, or you've gotten your first sponsor? Like, so everybody sees that differently. But for me, it was really just give it a shot and just know it's kind of like dating. Like you will be rejected a lot and you just got to be down with that. Like you're not that Wayne Gretzky quote of like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's that mindset of like you just have to go for it.
Uh-huh.
And I get rejected all the time. And if I'm not getting rejected, I'm like, okay, I'm not reaching far enough here.
Mm. I love that, listeners. Let's take that forward. Just open ourselves up to learn. I reframe the rejection to learn. So, what's the biggest rejection you've had?
Biggest rejection. That is such a good question. One that I will continue being rejected, but maybe someday I won't, would be I reach out to some people that are pretty big to be guests on the show. And I have reached out multiple times to Dr. Jennifer Doudna, who
Mhm.
won a Nobel Prize along with another scientist, another female scientist, which is very exciting,
Mm.
for this technology called CRISPR, which is a
Mhm.
gene editing technology. And I have reached out many times to be like, would love to be able to interview Dr. Doudna. And I keep getting rejections, but I'm like, at some point, maybe I'll be big enough that I can work into her schedule and everything. I mean, obviously, she's a busy researcher. She's not doing press 100% of the time. She's got a genetics career growing. But yeah, I think that's one that is a rejection I'll just kind of keep getting for a while. And I'm okay with that
Mm.
because you never know. What if the person getting that email is like, well, I can't get you an interview with her, but what about this other person?
Right.
You never
Right.
know. A rejection might be like, well, that's not going to work, but can we pivot?
Okay. I love that. Keep taking your shot. All right. So when you think about owning your career and your career body of work from podcasting to the genetics counseling, tell me what are the key ingredients or what is your formula for successfully owning your career?
I think it's a lot on just being determined and passionate and putting a lot of effort into it. I would never describe myself as the smartest person in the room. I think, I'm pretty average when it comes to book smarts, exams, things like that. But I think where I excel and where my career has been successful so far is in that I just work really hard. So I think it's about like you could have a really cool fancy car, but if there's no gas in it, you're not going anywhere.
Mm,
Where you could be, driving a Hyundai Accent like I do because I don't really care about cars. As long as it's safe, gets me to point A to point
that's
B.
right.
But there's gas in the tank, and so I can go, and it
Okay.
doesn't really matter. It's kind of a weird analogy, but yeah, for me, it hasn't been being really smart. It's just about putting the work in.
Mhm.
And a lot of that in my career has been networking, but also just, for the first 7 years of the show, we made no money. And it
Mhm.
wasn't a we, it was just a me at that point. There wasn't a
Mhm.
team behind me. But it was for me, the show started as a passion project and a way to build my network, but then also build my name in genetics because I was like, well, I never thought the show would make money. I never thought it would be a business. Like now we have over 80 sponsors. Like it's really taken off, which is
That's
exciting.
terrific.
But for me, it was about can I really learn a lot of people in genetics and be like, oh, yeah, I know Kira because
Mhm.
I talked to her in this place and then she interviewed me there. So for me, that was the important piece. It wasn't about the money, it was about how can I
Mhm.
build my career?
Mm. And how did the show help you to build your career?
So much. So I think every job I have had, which, I'm 29, but I've had a lot of odd jobs and different clients and everything. I've only had one salary job in my life. And I think every job I've had has been because of the podcast. And even if it wasn't DNA Today, if it was the podcast I started with, which I'm quite nerdy, as people can tell at this point. It was a Hunger Games podcast because the Harry Potter podcast was saturated that market. So I was like, all right, let's do the other upcoming series. So it was really looking at that, I think.
Looking at your career body of work. So if you look at your career body of work and you had to come up with a title for it, a book title, let's say, what would it be?
So because I've listened to your show, I got to think about this ahead of time. And as I was listening, I was like, oh, I should think about how I should answer this. So I'm going to steal a book title from one of my friends, Catherine Mayo, who has been on DNA Today many times. And we have talked about, just she's been a roommate of mine, good friend. And she said, well, if I ever write a memoir, I'd call it Connecting the Dots. And so I'm going to steal that from her. I'm at least I'm giving her credit here. But I think I like that concept of there's a bunch of different points in your career and kind of weaving them all together into one story. But also there is a connection in genetic counseling. We draw family history a lot. So we're drawing circles, squares, diamonds, a bunch of different symbols for people, and then connecting those to all be related if they're family members. So I think there's kind of that both sides to it that I like, of connecting the dots, something like that. So thank you, Catherine, for that.
Yes, so connect the dots career-wise. Connect your dots.
Connect my dots. So I think for me, it really started with exploring with podcasting and then having that be from 2011 when I was halfway through high school to then have it continue into now. What is that, like 14 years at this point? So I think that's always been my constant, but it's been interesting to see how the different degrees I've gotten over the years, the different experiences, including jobs, have all been pieces along the way of that. And I think it's interesting and for me, really cool to look back through the show of, wow, when I started the show in 2012, in this last 13 years, so much has changed within genetics, but even in my own career, I started the show as I don't know about genetics. Let me learn along with the audience. And now I know a lot more about genetics than I would say your average layperson, because I've got a couple degrees in it, including a master's. So I think for me, that's the constant. And then there's all these little dots along the way that's really kind of led me to where I am now. And that's, I'd like to think I've got a long career ahead of me. So
absolutely.
I'm not quite 30 yet.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of how you get to grow with the show. So you didn't have the degree in the beginning, but you're getting on the job training through these interviews, because I know with this show, I pick up so many insights from the guests that come on. There are a lot of similarities as well, but it keeps me thinking. And so I imagine you were thinking quite a bit and getting additional education. So you, as an interviewer, you changed. Your seat changed, your knowledge changed.
Oh, completely. Yeah. It definitely resonates with you, right? That it's just, you learn so much from guests and just the background. Clearly you did some research on me before, because this is the first time we're meeting in person.
Yeah.
Although
yeah.
I'm in an entrepreneur group with your husband.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So again, networking,
That's
that wouldn't
right.
have happened if I didn't join the entrepreneur group, talk to Steven, right? And he's like, wait, let me connect you.
Yes.
And it was really cute. He was like, to my better half. I'm like,
he always
so
said that.
cute, so cute.
My
But,
title.
Yeah. So I think, I've learned so much, and in genetic counseling, I work with pregnant people, and pretty local to our area. So I see patients in Stamford, Connecticut, so pretty close to the New York line. And so that's where I'm more that's a specialty for me, but I would like to think I'm fairly well-rounded because I interview people in all different areas of genetics: cardiac, neurology, pediatrics, oncology. So am I an expert in those areas? No, but I'm able to keep a pulse on what's happening in those fields. And oh, something big is, a new genetic testing product is on the market, or this new study just came out, or there's a new FDA approved treatment for something. I'm like, oh, I better get on that, find someone and talk about that. So I think it's been really cool to keep me well-rounded in that way, which I think is important earlier in a career, unless you really know, okay, this is the niche I want to stay in. But in general, I think it's good to stay somewhat well-rounded early and then whatever really grabs your interest, you could go deeper into that as you progress in your career.
I love that. I love the idea of that. And I'm wondering, I lost my train of thought just now. And this is live, so
Hey,
I
it
had a
happens.
question. I was following along. Oh, I know the question is back to me now. So when we think about resources to build up your skills, what sorts of resources? Because I heard you say, you got this tip around FDA, and I've got to get on it. I've got to learn. What are some of the resources that have been helpful to you to upskill or level up in your career?
Yeah, I think social media is not to be rot written off, because if you're in following the right people, it can be so helpful for me, especially, and for people listening to this, they're focused on building their career. LinkedIn is definitely hands down the best. I think when it comes to engagement, Instagram is pretty high for us too. TikTok is touch and go with how things have changed
Yeah.
legislative wise.
Yes.
But for us, like Instagram is pretty great. But I think in terms of what I personally get out of it, LinkedIn has been the best. And following whatever area your career is in. Like for me, I'm following the major genetic organizations, the companies, the
Smart.
thought leaders. And I will doom scroll, but at least I'm doom scrolling on LinkedIn. So I like to think, well, I'm helping my career. And then I'm like, all right, it's 1 a.m. Maybe go to bed. But at least I'm getting something out of it, I think, as opposed to just watching random
Yeah.
content that has nothing to do with my career.
Yeah, yeah, you want to be strategic and intentional with what you're doing. And I love the idea of thinking through companies, thought leaders, etc. What do you say to the person who is just a lurker? Because I know I talk to people and they're like, LinkedIn, yeah, I can't be myself, another social media platform. So what do you say to the person who is leery about jumping into LinkedIn?
I think you at least minimum have to set up an account, because if you're someone that is, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, so if you're someone that is applying to salary jobs, or you're in a nice job, but you're like, you never know when you get let go, or
That's right.
you suddenly have to move, find a new job. Like sometimes that suddenly happens. And I think it's important that you have an established LinkedIn profile where the URL is also customized to your name, which is
Yeah.
free. You don't have to pay for that aspect. I
Yeah.
only recently got premium. I don't know why it took me so long, but it's
I have
expensive.
premium. It is expensive.
It's expensive. It's a few
But it's
hundred
worth
here,
it. Yeah.
but it is worth it once, I think, if you can swing that financially. But the ROI is really good on it. But I think just setting that up, that I got LinkedIn.com, I think it's /IN/Kira Deneen.
Yeah.
And to me, that was really important. And if you have a name that other people have, figuring out what's after that, like maybe, like for you, you're a career coach. So maybe it's your name and then career coach or something, right?
Yep.
So I think that's important. Even if you're not posting, to keep it updated of the experiences you've had. It can be helpful to have some people do recommendations for you on
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
absolutely.
I used to be really big on that. I should probably circle back and do that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm sure they're all like 10 years old on there.
Yeah.
But even if you're not doing your own posts, you can still be engaging and reacting to posts. So
That's
when you're
right.
like, liking it, hearting it, supporting it, also commenting, even when you comment, that ends up, like if I saw, Simone, you comment on someone else's post, that might end up being in my feed of
Yep.
Simone commented on this, and then it's in my feed, even though I don't follow that person that posted the
Yes.
original. So I think even if you're not posting original content, that's totally fine. You can still be really engaged, and you can think about, especially depending on where your career is and if it's a very controversial area, maybe, of being very choosy about which ones you're interacting with. Because obviously digital footprint is very easy to follow.
Yeah. I'm seeing there's someone named Madison Butler on LinkedIn, and there's some issues where people, are free. They're free with their comments, and she does a screen grab and highlights where you work. So yeah, the digital footprint doesn't go away, like you say.
Especially LinkedIn, because it's probably your name and then your title or the company you work
Yeah.
at as your subheader, basically.
Yeah.
So, which you can customize, which I also recommend doing. But yeah, it's one click and you find out where someone works. So
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even reposting content, I have found, if there's a cultural celebration and someone does the research and it's really good, I end up reposting it with my thoughts. So sometimes you don't have to be the original thought leader of the content, of course, giving the person credit, but it's a way to consistently be out there and be having conversations. Kira, tell us about risk and taking risk in your career. How do you embrace it? How do you feel about it?
I feel like I should have been taking more risks, especially being somewhat young. Like it's kind of like investing in the stock market. Like you could be pretty aggressive at the beginning,
Yes.
but as you get closer to retirement, you're like, okay, well, let's not take too many risks,
Yeah.
because you don't have time for that money to come back.
Yes.
So I think the way that I've taken a risk is by investing so much time into my show when especially that first 7 years, I didn't make any money. It's like for Christmas, I'd ask for a new mic. Like that's kind of what life was like back then. And so that was, something where I was spending a lot of time on it, but I just had this feeling like, just keep going with it. I could have spent all of that time working at a job and making money those years, but now it's certainly, I think, paid off of like the time that I did put in. But I think the biggest risk I've taken recently is stepping back from my full-time salary job. And that was hard because I was paid really well. And I was like, okay, am I really going to step back and not have benefits, not have 401k matching, all of the health insurance, like all of that. I was like, okay, I'm really doing this. So I basically told my employer, I was like, hey, I would like to stay on, but part-time and just do 2 days a week, 10-hour days so that I can still do my job, but I can focus more on the podcasting aspect. And it was tough because obviously that basically cuts my salary in half. But so it was risky because I'm like, all right, I'm not going to make as much money, but I can spend way more time building up the show and getting more sponsors and going back to sponsors and being like, hey, what are we doing next? And I'm still figuring out my taxes right now, as many people are. And I'm like, wow, all right, I actually did about the same as the year before. So I made up a lot of the income I would have had through a salary job and through sponsorships and everything. So, but it was a little risky.
Yeah.
A little bit. But, I think if that's the biggest risk I've taken, I'm not taking enough risks.
Yeah. I love that. And you're likely to surpass your salary job.
I think in 2025. Yes.
So I'm wondering about the mindset and the conversation you have with yourself. What do you tell yourself to really bet on yourself?
Yeah, for me, and I'm in a fortunate position where like financially I can do this and not everyone can. But I'm in a place where I'm like, well, let's not the sponsorship and all of that is great because it also builds up the show. It's not just about the money coming from the sponsors, but we also work together in creating content that's really, really great for our listeners and our audience. But at the same time, I am more focused on building my career than making money at this point. And for me, building the career, the money will come, and that's great. But focused on like, let's say if I'm to write a book, that's not very lucrative in the sense of actually writing a book. I'm not a huge name, right? People aren't going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till this book comes out. There's not going to be a midnight release, right? Like I'm not Rebecca Yarros, but I think that's a career builder. Once you've written a book, you can start getting even bigger interviews and it just builds your career much more. Whereas maybe that second book makes money. But from what I've learned, and one of my good friends, Robert Biscacci, who has been on the show before, like he wrote a book. And it's very much, just what I've learned from him. It's more focused on the career building and the process of writing a book, I think is really, really exciting. So that's something that I would like to do in the near future, and just spending time investing in my career and knowing that, okay, money is there, but that's not my top priority at this point in life.
Oh, I love this interview. We could talk all day.
Yeah.
We could talk all day, Kira. But tell our listeners, or are there any parting words that you would say to someone listening to the show wanting to get in the driver's seat in their career?
I think you just got to do it. I think that's so much of what I think holds people back is like, oh, but I don't know I don't know how to do this. I don't know where to start. You just go.
Yeah.
Well, you get in the driver's seat, you start driving. You may not know where you're driving yet, but just try to go in the right direction and bet on yourself. I think invest in yourself, and you'll figure it out. And it's the journey is going to change a lot, and you'll be going in different directions. But I think focused on this is your career and this, like, where do you want to go, having some goals, but know that those will be adjusted over time, and just putting the work in and being passionate and really just being a hard worker. That to me is 90% of the work. Is just showing up, doing it, trying, and you will learn as things go. So I think if more people were working hard like that, especially like early career, I think that they would be more successful, because I think that's where I found my success. It's not from being a brainiac. It's not from, being a Nepo baby or anything, it's just like hard work and, figuring it out.
Yeah, I receive that as consistency, because I know there are people out there who are working hard, but that have challenges that can stall or slow down their progress. So how I receive what you're saying is the consistent action is going to yield result in your career.
Yeah, like even I think as an example for DNA Today, I finished grad school during the pandemic, so in like 2020. And so I think the year after is when we started releasing episodes every Friday, and we have not missed since. And that's been like 4 years. So consistency, I think, is very key in podcasting, as you've probably learned as well with this show. But just anywhere, if you just keep grinding, I think, that's, and you get to a point where you're like, okay, I don't really need to grind anymore. I can kind of reevaluate and redistribute some of the work and everything. But at the beginning, I think that's what's so important.
Yeah. Sow those seeds at the beginning and bet on yourself. If you take nothing else from this episode, bet on yourself, and bet in a big way. Kira, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. Tell our listeners how they can connect with you if they'd like to do so.
Yeah. So I think I'll steal Amanda Butler's or Butler at the end of her interview. Find me on LinkedIn. I think if you're a career person, then that's going to be a good place. I mean, if you're interested in genetics, definitely check out DNA Today. I do a bunch of different shows, but that's my own personal show. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn, KiraDeneen. And you should be able to find me, but also just through Simone's network, you can find me that way.
Absolutely. And we'll be able to put that in the show notes so you can take a look at that, listeners. And we've decided this episode is going live on LinkedIn. So pretty exciting. You get to see us live having this conversation. And Kira, thank you so much for showing up today and dropping so many gems on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a treat just to be able to record in person. And I hope everybody is enjoying this new season.
All right. Awesome. Take care, listeners, and thanks a lot for listening. That's it for today's empowering episode. I'm Simone E. Morris, and I want you to remember that you are indeed the architect of your career. Share this episode if it sparked something in you. Subscribe wherever you listen, and find more resources at SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org. Keep practicing career ownership, and I'll be right here with you next week for more transformation.